Okay, well, welcome everybody to this fourth webinar on Makers Empire. And again, we've got the lovely Mandy presenting for us on how to get started using Makers Empire. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Abigail. It's great to be here again, and thank you very much for all of you finding the time to join after school at this busy time of the school year and day. So really appreciate that. Oops, apologies. Just fix up my slides. So there we go. I was starting at the end, which was not the best place to start. So in this webinar this afternoon, I wanted to unpack what you need and why you might want to get started with Makers Empire. So as Abigail said, I'm Mandy from Makers Empire, and I'm the Director of Learning. My background is in primary school teaching and museum education, and then I was also spent quite a few years in the Department for Education working on the Australian curriculum and pedagogy teams. But I've been with Makers Empire for about 7 years now. Makers Empire is an Adelaide-based company who were formed about eight and a half years ago. And since that time, we now work with schools around Australia and other parts of the world. So just a bit of housekeeping. If you can keep your microphones off unless you are actually speaking, please use the chat function. We have the lovely Abigail there to respond, pass on any questions or response, and I will also be using the chat function with a little bit of interactivity, so you're not just sitting there. You don't have to put your cameras on, that's fine. And just so you know, Abigail is recording the session so that she can share it with others and on the website. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm meeting you from Ghanaland, and I would like to pay respect to the ongoing and deep connections that Ghana people have to land and country. This beautiful image, if you're not familiar with Corey Tutt's work, is from his latest book called The First Scientist, which looks at how our First Nations people have been using science and technology to solve problems, to interact with country and to live in sustainable ways for many, many, many thousands of years. And I love this image and I love the book. There's another chapter I love about using the night sky to navigate, to tell story and to predict the change of seasons and movement of animals. But really, I like to share it also because what I'm about to share is about students using products like Makers Empire to think critically and creatively and solve problems and use design thinking, which is really what our First Nations people have been doing for over 60,000 years. We just have access to new technologies now. So in our time together this afternoon, I would like to unpack what Makers Empire is. I know some of you may have used it before, so it may be new to others. I will then give you a bit of a tour of what we call Maker World and our specific design tool. So I'll show you what the offering is that we have for students, and then our teacher dashboard, which is where teachers manage all their students' designs and learning and access resources. I would then like to give you some examples and some applications for using Makers Empire in the classroom, and leave you with a couple of opportunities that you may be interested in coming up to get involved with. And then hopefully at the end we'll have time for any questions that you might have. So that's what I would like to use this time together for this afternoon. So what is Makers Empire? As I said, we've existed for 8.5 years with a shared vision, which I'm sure you share too, that what we would love to see is every child or young person empowered to become creators, innovators and problem solvers. We really believe that that skill set, that mindset is what it takes to be able to make our own worlds better. So the world globally, but also our own individual worlds. We want to empower young people to have that capability. So we set about trying to achieve this lofty vision by using our products, which at its core is 3D design software, and our programs to help develop students' creative confidence and their design thinking skills, and fostering that interest in STEM. We have 3 pillars to our offering. The first, as I said, our core product is 3D modelling software, specifically designed for the primary to middle school offering cohort. So from 5 years to about 14 years is where we sit. And our design software works on all platforms. So it works on iPads, Windows machines, Mac machines, Android, Chromebooks, etc. And it's been designed with that younger audience in mind. So you can see just from that little snapshot that it's game-based, it's bright and colourful and intuitive to use. It doesn't pretend to be professional CAD software, but it's a really good segue for students learning to use those more professional type software later on in high school, and hopefully encouraging a few more students to be curious and develop their skills in that area. Having said that, the software, the modelling app is easy enough for a 4-year-old to put a cone and a sphere together and make an ice cream, through to being able to make really accurate functional 3D printed models. So that's the first pillar, our app. The second pillar, which I mentioned briefly, is our teacher dashboard, where you're able to monitor what your students are doing. You can look at their designs, download their designs for 3D printing or AR applications, and you can assign design challenges and design missions to students, provide feedback and assessment, as well as access a bunch of resources, including an online professional development course and downloadable resources. The other pillar of our business is professional development. We believe that it's really important to support teachers to implement these sorts of technologies and learning programs in ways that impact positively on student learning. So we really believe strongly in supporting teachers in that way. Just a couple of other quick things, a range of logos and things at the bottom, that we have partnered with a few universities, the Macquarie University, on a study a few years ago now, but that study looked at both our impact on student and teacher learning, and the results of that study encouraged us that we were on the right track to keep going. I'll talk a bit about our recent UniSA study very soon. A bunch of awards and pedagogical accreditation through Education Alliance Finland, which was a very rigorous process, but extremely exciting and rewarding to be part of. So, although our Makers Empire is a 3D modelling app, it's not our end goal that we want students to be awesome 3D designers. They might be, and that's great, but we're really wanting our students to come out with that skill set that I've already talked about, problem solving and design thinking and so on. And design thinking is a great tool. I'm sure you've heard the terminology before and may well be using this in your teaching and learning programs. I won't read my own quote, but basically design thinking gives us a framework to find problems, solve problems and test the solutions once we've come up with them. What I love about design thinking is it enables us to reframe a problem or a challenge or a brick wall into an opportunity, into something that we can develop a solution for. So I do talk a lot more about design thinking in the other webinar series that I'm running with Abigail. So if you're interested in that, we'll catch up another time. But I did want to make the point that design thinking is part of our Australian curriculum. It's most evident in the design and technology subject of our technologies learning area, And one of the things that's fantastic about this curriculum area is that it's thinking based. So it's all about students creating solutions for preferred futures, very similar goal to what I was talking about Makers Empire's vision being. But we're creating those solutions through thinking, design thinking, computational thinking, and systems thinking. The other area of research that I wanted to touch on briefly, because this is part of why you might adopt something like our program in schools, the research that we've recently completed with University of South Australia, UniSA, is around spatial reasoning. And there's a whole lot of other research around the world telling us how important spatial reasoning skills and abilities are for future success in STEM. And one of the most notable research studies that came out of the US started with students in middle school and measured their a whole lot of numeracy, including spatial reasoning, and their literacy levels. And then those students were tracked over nearly 4 decades. So it was a very longitudinal study. And then they kept checking in with those students as they graduated and went on to future careers and so on. And the finding of that study was that those students who went on to choose STEM pathways, so went on to STEM courses at uni, went on to STEM-based careers and were good at those things, the thing that those students had in common were high levels of spatial reasoning ability at middle school. So that excited everybody. There's a whole lot of other studies that back that up too, but it was an exciting revelation that there is a predictor of future success in STEM, and then that might be something that we can do to support students having better outcomes in those areas. So anyway, we partnered with the University of South Australia, and we used a measuring instrument that was developed by Canberra Uni for 11 to 13-year-olds. And over the course of a term, using the Makers Empire program, we saw significant growth in students' spatial reasoning abilities. It assessed 3 different types of spatial reasoning skill. And so there was a significant increase in skill, but what we found was that some of the groups that started lower made the most progress, and those groups that started generally at a lower level in that test were females, our regional remote schools, and students from schools with a low socioeconomic index number. So that's where we're at the moment. This has recently been released, and we're really excited to be having this impact and hoping to do more with that.
Mandy, can you share the name of the study with us after? That's fine.
I'm very happy to share. Oh, sorry, Abigail. I'm very happy to share both the report, and there's also a summary document I've put together that I can share with you.
Fabulous. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so, and of course, spatial reasoning is found in several places in our curriculum, but mostly in the space strand of mathematics. And it's quite interesting when I said earlier that people around the world have got excited about this research, and not ours, but the bigger body of research saying how important spatial reasoning skills are, that this is starting to be reflected in our curriculum and curriculum around the world. So just two quick examples. If we look at the space strand of version 8.4 compared to version 9, and I've just pulled out an example from Foundation and an example from Year 5. If we look at describe position and movement is what version 8.4 wanted students to be able to do. That's still in version 9, but it's talking about not just describing the position, but the location of themselves and objects in relation to other people, which is a key spatial reasoning ability, that orientation of your own body and objects in terms of their relationship to other objects and people. And similarly, in Year 5, you can see that version 8.4 was around connecting 3D objects with their nets, and other 2D representations, which is still in version 9, but it's making that explicit link that this action, this skill, is about using spatial and geometric reasoning. Just thought I would put that in because we're finding that a really interesting part of our work. So I'm going to stop talking for 2 seconds, and I'd love you to pop in the chat. Have you used Makers Empire before? Have you used Makers Empire before is my question. Are we seeing some results for that yet, Abigail?
Kelly hasn't. Angela hasn't a lot, and she needs some support, and Sharon hasn't either.
Oh, fantastic.
So it might be a whole range of new people.
Yay, that's awesome. So let's get on to the fun stuff. So what I wanted to start with was a bit of a tour of the main parts of what we call 3D World. So I'm just going to hop out of my presentation and open the app up. We can still see that okay?
Yes, perfect.
Beautiful. So Makers Empire is a 3D modelling tool, but as I said in the beginning, it's game-based, and it also includes a lot of content and activities for programs for students to work on. All of that inbuilt content and activity is in our 3D World space, which is where you land when you first join Makers Empire. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a tour of the main buildings that you'll find in 3D World. The very first time you or your students log on to Makers Empire, most of these buildings are going to be greyed out because we want you to go into our training lab and work through a number of little tasks or challenges that help you learn how to use the tools. Your very first task is to design your avatar. So that's my frog there. Oops. And the reason that we make that the first activity is that we want our students to be creating straight away, but also it's that digital responsibility that an avatar represents us in this app rather than being us. So we're not putting anything personal. I don't really want my frog to have that hair, but now it does. And then there's, like I said, there's a range of little tutorials that we work through. So in this one, we're finding the candy, but what we're actually doing is learning how to rotate the camera to view our designs from all the different viewpoints. So once you've done that, once you've done the basic training, there are other doors that open up in our training lab. In Pro Training, there's a bunch of ready-made designs that you can learn to use. So if I wanted to make a simple blob, I can have a go at that Pro Training tutorial. And I like to think of these as a bit like digital Lego. With Lego, you can make anything you like, but you can also have a kit, and that gives you exactly the pieces you need to create a model and the instructions to work through step by step. So this is a way of just using the shapes that you need for a particular design and following step by step. And what that means is that we have step-by-step text instructions. We can also use our text-to-speech tool, which is everywhere you see this little speaker icon, it will read the instructions.
Choose any colour.
Which can be useful for younger students or lower literacy, or it's just very visual, so you can pretty much follow along with the flashing shapes and the hands and so on. So that's, I won't continue making my blob creature, but that's what a Pro Training tutorial is. It's a great way for both you and your students to develop some basic design skills And the other application for this is it can also be a self-directed teaching tool. So for example, if I was wanting to learn how to resize shapes, if I click on the resize tab, it then brings out those pro training tutorials that use that resize function. So I can practice that by doing some tutorials. So that's pro training. In our video room, these videos are actually created by our student ambassadors. When we notice that a student's particularly talented at creating designs, we often invite them to be an ambassador, and part of that is creating these how-to videos. So you can see some quite amazing things that students are creating, and this is a place for other students to learn, and they love watching this sort of stuff on YouTube, so why not in a safe environment in Makers Empire? So that's our training lab. Maze Mania, the green one there, is a place where students make their own 3D mazes and then play each other's mazes. So that's probably the most popular spot in Makers Empire with students anyway. It can be a bit too popular. But if I go now into our competition arena, every month we have a design-based competition that is about solving a problem or related to something that's happening around the world. It's a global competition, and we usually have around 20,000 students enter the competition each month, which I get to judge, which is pretty cool. This month it's around recycling, reduce, recycle, reuse. So we're asking students to invent something that helps us to use our Earth's resources in better ways. And then the students can click on enter, design something, explain what they've made, and they're part of that competition. We have students from 51 countries using our app, so it's a genuinely global design community that they become part of. And we do have, we reward, have prizes which are tokens which you earn in the app to unlock things and buy designs and shapes. And we also send out a 3D printed trophy to our winner. We have a lot of teachers who enjoy having this in the app because they know every month there'll be something new that their students can enter. They build it into their classroom program, or it might be a homework task or an extension activity or something like that. Along those lines, we also have our daily challenges, that little purple sign hovering there. And our daily challenges are calendar-based design tasks, again related to things that are happening around the world, those special days. Like this one, it's Go for a Ride Day. So we're challenging students to invent a new form of rideable transport, but tomorrow it will be something different. Sometimes it might be something like, on this day, the escalator was first patented. Design and more efficient way to move from one story of a building to another, or something like that. So once again, teachers find this quite useful, as there's always an idea, something new to try, and they, as a homework task or group activity or extension, early finish, those sorts of things. So that's there. But having visited all of those buildings, perhaps the most important buildings in Maker World are these two stations at the front. So Challenge Central is where students will access what we call our challenge courses. And what you see in Challenge Central, what a student sees here, depends on what their teacher has assigned to them. So I've got a whole lot to me here, but open to me here, but what a student will see depends on what their teacher wants them to do. So what a challenge course is a series of activities connected through a theme and aligned to curriculum, and a lot of them address UN Sustainable Development Goals as well. So, for example, this one is about awesome animals. It's aligned to design and technology, as all of our courses are, but it's also aligned to science. So we're looking at animal adaptations, and there are different activity types. So we have little videos.
In this challenge path, you will enter the world of awesome animals. You will explore clever ways that animals have adapted their bodies and behaviours to survive in different types of environments.
So get the idea that little videos that we've created in-house, a bit like mini BTN segments. And then we have quizzes based on our videos, like this one. So your avatar is now featuring in a quiz show and answering multiple choice questions about the content from that video. What is an organism? Let's say it's a living thing. And you can see that we're earning tokens. If we do get an answer incorrect, we look disappointed, but then we get a clue and an opportunity to start again, to have another go. And when we're in the teacher dashboard, I'll show you how you can see how students are going and how many attempts they're having and so on. And then we have those pro training tutorials that I talked about before. So in this one, you've learned a little bit about how animals survive on the ice. You've checked out a quiz, and now you're learning to design one way of designing a polar bear paw, because you've learned that polar bears have these large broad paws to allow them to spread their weight evenly on the ice. So it goes through that kind of pattern, video, quiz, tutorial, and then these end in a open-ended design thinking challenge. So now that you have this knowledge and skills and understandings, let's put this together and design an animal that might survive in a particular environment, something like that. So we have a whole range of these. They vary in length, from one that might last 3 lessons to that Awesome Animals one. There is about 10 lessons within that. And they're also for different age groups as well. So that's challenge courses. The other place that you can assign content to students is in our mission control. So when students first go into mission control, they need to build a rocket, and so that they can launch the missions. And they come and talk to Pickles. Got a lot to say. Try to make him say it quickly. Yes, I am listening. When I go in here, I've been putting some quick examples in here, but what a student will see is the mission that their teacher wants them to do, the instructions, which you can flesh out and make into a design brief, and then they can click on one of those when they're ready to start creating their, in this case, coffee mug, but it could be whatever you like. So the difference between those challenge courses, like the Awesome Animals one, and a mission is that a challenge course is kind of more like a unit of work or project that's got all of the content built in, whereas a mission is a one-off design activity. So it might connect to something you're doing in the classroom or some kind of project that you've got on the go. So they're one-off design challenges that you can assign. You can make your own or use ones that we've got, whereas the challenge courses you assign the pre-existing content. So that is 3D World. Does anybody have anything they want me to go back to before I move on to the next bit?
Feel free to come off your mic if you want to ask a question directly, or type in the chat.
All right, in that case, was that someone?
No, that was me just saying I think we're all okay at this point.
In that case, Abigail, I'm going to ask one more question, if you can, another question, if you can monitor the chat. I'm just interested, has anyone used any 3D modelling software before, either with students at school or in their outside lives? We got some responses?
I think this might be new to lots of people on this call.
Oh, very good. So let's keep going, and I'll show you our 3D modelling tools. Thanks, Abigail. So I'm now going up to create. So what I've gone through so far is built-in content, and if you're new, to be honest, that's the best place to start. There's a lot of tried and tested ideas in there for you to assign and get started with your students. But if we go into the create tab, this is where you go if you just want to create without all the built-in content. And we have two design tools to choose from. Shaper, as the name suggests, is about combining shapes to make new objects. So I talked before about, in its simple form, we can grab a cone and I'm going to make it into an ice cream cone, and then I might grab a sphere. Strawberry's my favourite, and I can move that into there and I have an ice cream cone. But then if I want to make more accurate things, I can turn on our precision tools where I can type in exact measurements, exact angles of rotation and location, etc. So it's about joining, combining shapes to make new objects. We can cut that sphere out there. So I've now got a hollow section in my cone, which could then become the basis of a party hat, perhaps, to go on someone's head. Yeah, so that's Shaper. The other, let me put some other shapes in there. And there's a range of things you can do here. Pretty much anything you design in Makers Empire can be 3D printed, but you can also download the designs to use in other applications such as AR or VR. And an example I saw the other day, a really popular design task for primary school is to design new playground equipment for the school. But with the AR function, you can actually go and see your design out in the playground to see if it's going to work, if it's big enough, small enough, fits with the environment, etc. So we have our AR function here. Another new function we've just added is our notes. So that little guy, that little pin, what we can now do is add notes to a design. So this brings in literacy, of course, but it's also a really good assessment tool. For example, you can ask students to create a design that has particular criteria or meets a certain purpose or even tells a story. And they can now use the notes tool to label their design or to explain the different features or what they've done. So if this was a party hat, I chose red because it's my favourite colour. And then maybe I do the band. I could type in or I can record some text. Record. This ring helps the hat stay tightly on my head. And then after I've done that, I can play my design. So I chose red because it's my favourite colour. This ring helps the hat stay tightly on my head. So that's another feature. We've also seen teachers use that for narrative, because that was my other point. You can download for 3D printing or AR, but you can also just use the design tools for creating and expressing ideas. That doesn't have to be for 3D printing. Most of the learning happens in that design and creation space. What I was going to say was sometimes we've seen teachers ask their students to create a scene or setting from a narrative, or actually tell a narrative, and then use that notes tool to retell or construct the story. So that's Shaper. Blocker, as the name also suggests, is about putting a series of blocks together to create objects. So it's very Minecrafty, and the students that love Minecraft do incredible things with this. So they're our two design tools, and there's all sorts of tutorials and help with learning to use these and developing your own skills. Okay, what I would like to do next is to jump into our teacher dashboard. Just go into a demo school. So what I should say here is that, that there are two main things, as I've already mentioned, but the app is a downloadable app that students will have on their devices for their designing. You can also have access to that as a teacher, as part of your teacher account. The teacher dashboard is a website-based tool, so you access this through the Makers Empire website. And basically this is where you manage your classes. So I can see I've got my list of students there. If I click on the account I was just on there, I'm starting to see the silly design I just started. There's my party hat that used to be a ice cream cone, and I'm starting to get some data on what the students been doing. So the students created 215 designs. An effort score is our best attempt at measuring the complexity of a design. So not just how long they spent on it, but how many edits did they make, how many different tools or shapes did they use, because sometimes the simplest design is actually quite complex in its design. So we can see that the students spent 8 hours in total, and they've been on the Shaper module for 71% of that time, and 21% making their avatar, and a little bit of tiny blocker. So I can start to see that student's design portfolio. In terms of assigning that content that I talked about, if we go to class management and then go to challenge courses, you can see all of our different challenge courses that we have available. We aim to have at least one new one every term, and sometimes more. So keep looking here, because there's always something new. Like I said before, they are aimed at different age groups and different lengths. So you can have a look at that. If you wanted to know more about one, you click on the details and it gives us an overview, the learning objectives, and the actual activities that we are going to be doing in that challenge course. So that gives you a bit of an idea about whether this is going to be suitable for your students and your needs. And let's go back. And then you can just assign whichever ones you want to your classes. And remember, that's what students will see in that challenge central of 3D section of 3D World, whatever the teacher has selected for them to see. And what I wanted to show you specifically were the progress reports. So as students start to work on their challenge courses, let's see this one, it starts to build up a picture of where everyone's up to. And it's a bit of a traffic light system. So green, which I've got in this demo class, means that the student is progressing through this as you would expect. But if you see some yellow, it means that they seem to be a little bit stuck or taking longer than would normally be expected. And if there's red, then they are stuck and need help. And then you can click on any of these and see what more information about what that student's been working on. At the end of a challenge course, you can send feedback, or at any stage you can send feedback. You can send some Makers Empire tokens as a reward. and you can also give that student a certificate for completing the course. And a report is basically an individual summary of what each student has done and how they went with all the activities. And that is quite often used by teachers as in students' learning portfolios or things like that. So also I talked about missions, which were those one-off design tasks or design activities you want your students to do. So in Makers Empire, we have already created a whole lot of these, which you can filter out by age year level. So if we go year 3, 4, in a group, design a castle for the king of silliness or design a toy for babies that rolls on the floor. There's a whole bunch here, and you could assign that to your students. But we could also create our own. So let's say we're doing a unit of work, year 8 HAS, around Vikings. Create something that shows your understanding of Viking culture. Obviously, you'd spend more time wording this, and then you can have your mission brief. So that's instructions, or it could also be the criteria for that particular design. So your design must include a form of transport. And you can put, you can put anything you like in there. I can choose whether I want my students to use Shaper or Blocker, and then I can choose the class that I want to assign that to. So I've assigned this to my class, and then what happens is the next time that student goes into Makers Empire, they'll get this message that's just popped up at the bottom. Create something that shows your understanding of Viking culture, and your design must include a form of transport. And then, so if I do click on that, and I'll just pretend, get started, just pretend that I've created, there's my Viking boat, very, very quickly, and I can give it, it's not a boat, it's a tower. Okay. Yes, I thought that was a good mission. Thank you. And then what happens is that a teacher will then go into view and assess. And I'm looking for my class, which was class 2. I want to see my teacher missions, and I want the Viking. Oops. Create something. Why didn't I? Yeah, there we go. Why didn't I just call it Vikings? And there it is there. So the point of doing this is that instead of having to go through all my students' designs in the classes, I can now filter out just those that were doing the Viking challenge, and I'll see all of those starting to appear here. So I can click on that, and I can send the students feedback. They don't see the term satisfactory below or above, but that's for your own assessment purposes. You can give feedback, use one of our built-in things, and award tokens if you want to, and then send the assessment. You can also use that as a more formative assessment too, that gives show me how the tower would work, or maybe the tower, maybe what could you do to make the tower stronger, or something like that. So there obviously is a lot in the dashboard and in the app. But they were the main takeaways that I would suggest starting with 3D World and looking at some of that inbuilt content, particularly the challenge courses or assigning teacher missions. I'm just going to go back to my presentation now. And what I would like to do now is to give some examples of how Makers Empire is being used in actual classrooms. Okay, we did that. So here is an example. I talked about playground design being quite a popular choice of activity. This example comes from a Year 3 class where the school were actually redesigning their playground. And the Year 3s took this on as a design thinking project. And what they had noticed is that not all of their friends could have as much fun on the playground, existing playground, as they could. They had a friend in a wheelchair who could get into the existing playground fine, but once he got in there, there was nothing much that he could do. They had another friend with epilepsy who didn't feel safe in the playground, even though it met standards for softball and that sort of thing. She still felt like she could, if she fell, she would hit her head on something. And they had another friend who lives on the autism spectrum who just felt completely overwhelmed at times in the playground. So the students worked in groups and created a piece of playground equipment that they would like to add to the new playground that allowed everybody to enjoy the site. And you can see here, these are 3D printed models of their design. So they made these in Makers Empire and then printed them out and put it together as a class plan of what they'd like to see their playground looking like. So there are pieces of equipment there that wheelchairs can go into, and the little house in the top left corner, that was designed as a safe, quiet place to go if you were overwhelmed, and it's actually got that their student with autism's favourite numbers and shapes inside it. And the really cool thing about this project was that these students ended up working with the designers and landscapers who were building the playground, and some of these pieces were actually built, which is pretty cool. This is an example from a reception class, our 5-year-olds, and they were looking at characteristics that make us special and unique as individuals. So these are their unique monsters. So they had to make sure that their monster looked different to everyone else's monster. And then this was also the basis for lots of descriptive oral language activity as well, all their unique monsters. Lovely school, Mundalla in the southeast. The local Progress Association put out a call to the community, not just the school, but to the community, to design an entrance artwork. So a welcome to Mundalla entrance to be erected on the roadside. So the teacher thought this was a great authentic project to get stuck into. So the students went out to the area, they did a lot of measuring and thinking about how big the structure would have to be so that it was visible, but also thinking about angles and road safety and things like that. And then they went back to their class and started to think about how they wanted to represent their town. And came up with their scale models. They also had to explain what these would look like in the actual structure, so what materials they would use that would be sustainable and durable. And then these designs, or the designs they chose to put forward, were on display in the local shop front, where the local people were voting on which one they wanted to actually build. So in this instance, the 3D printing is being used as a prototyping tool. Another playground example from an older class, and I put this one in because the students were able to choose their materials for prototyping, and you can see the green and the little brown one are both 3D printed, but we've got traditional construction materials, bottle tops and pop sticks as well. So nice complementary and choice in that activity. And then here we've got animal adaptations again. So created an animal that's adapted for a particular environment and then created the environment. And one of the great things we see lots of in Makers Empire are examples where students have worked through a design thinking process using the tools and the technology to come up with solutions to problems that matter in their world and in their schools and communities. So I'm just going to share this example from Year 5 with you. And please let me know, Abigail, if the sound doesn't work. It should do because I clicked the magic button today, but let's see.
For the past few weeks, we have been doing a STEM activity helping the groundskeepers put their phone in a phone case so they don't get chopped up or destroyed by the tractor.
Each person came up with a design. When they came up with a design, they went to their groups and either chose the best design or they worked together to improve it.
Then they came up with a design to make it stronger or easy to use.
And then the groups made a prototype to see what the rough design was going to look like.
This is our prototype. The prototype may have changed drastically or not so much in Makers Empire when we were making it. Our design had to be changed quite a bit during this process.
When we made our prototype, we found all the problems and fixed them.
We went on the computers to create a phone holder. What are you going to do with those things?
The feedback that we got for our design was really helpful because it helped us improve our design to make it better.
We had to redesign it because it was too small and wouldn't have fit. So we went back on Makers Empire and tried again.
This was our first attempt on the 3D printer, and as you can see, it was a big fail because there wasn't enough support in this design.
So we had to make some changes.
We had to make sure the size was right so Michael's or Big Fish's phone would fit into the holder.
We thought about sustainability and not using much material, which was difficult because the phone holders had to be quite large to hold the phones properly.
This is our group's creation that we have designed. It is pretty strong and solid and it doesn't need many support structures.
We had to make sure it was less than 150 millimeters, which is 15 centimeters, so that it would fit in the 3D printer.
We collaborated and got there in the end.
Through the design process, we found some things challenging.
It was challenging every step of the way, but we were resilient and tried our best.
These are some designs we came up with.
We learned a lot about 3D printing and design while completing our task and hope we can solve more problems in the future.
Okay. So conscious of time, these sessions always go quick. Who knew I could talk non-stop for an hour? But what I wanted to share with you was some opportunities for you to get on board and have a go. We have been running this year and we'll continue next year to run what we call our managed term projects. So basically these are centred around one of our challenge courses, like the Awesome Animals one that I shared with you. But you get support from our team as well. So these are something you can access for free if you're an existing Makers Empire customer, or there's a small charge if you wanted to do this as a kind of managed pilot of the project and assess whether it's of the product, assess whether it's suitable for your context. So we are offering natural disasters in term 1, and then we're about to release our program for the rest of next year, but there'll be a different one each year. So natural disasters is one of those challenge courses that looks at what natural disasters are, why they happen, how they happen, and how people work to understand them and prepare for them, respond for them, and help us live with natural disasters. So there's that whole course, and what a managed project also includes is a webinar series and some additional teaching and learning resources and check-ins, suggested sort of program to implement. So if you are interested in that, Natural Disasters is available to sign up for at the moment. We also do a whole range of projects with different partners, and I will share these links with Abigail, but if you're on our website, you can see the projects that we have recently done or ones that we have coming up. So you can see that we've partnered with the Andy Thomas Space Foundation to do our Kids in Space program, which will be running again next year, a bushfire charity, the Construction Industry Training Board, SA Water, a whole bunch of different projects. And what that means is it's the sort of project like the students worked on with the mobile phone holder, but it has a particular focus, an industry focus. So it might be space or water conservation, and that we bring in that expert content from and expertise from our partners. And the projects include free access to Makers Empire. They include professional development. Sometimes they include a 3D printer. Sometimes they include access to our bureau where we do the printing for you. But they're all funded, and generally the cost to schools is releasing teachers for the PD, and the rest is covered. But if you're interested, I'll share that link with Abigail, and it's worth expressing interest in whichever ones appeal to you. And at our simplest level, you can also sign up for a free trial. We have a 60-day trial where you can just have a play and check out everything that I have been sharing with you today. So to access the trial, you just need to go to makersempire.com and click up on the top right-hand corner, Start Teacher Trial, the pink button there, and that will give you access to both the app that I looked at and the teacher dashboard for those 60 days. So you can check everything out and see whether it's something that you're interested in going further with. So Abigail, I think that is everything I wanted to share in terms of getting started with Makers Empire without overwhelming people too much. So I'm wondering whether there's any questions or things people would like to know more about.
It's been fairly quiet so far, but if you do have some questions, please come off mute and ask now. Georgina did share that one reception class at her site last year made Christmas tree decorations, and she thinks that's fantastic because they can keep them for life. So that's a nice idea at this time of year, maybe to get people started.
Yeah, and I also think that the Christmas decoration idea is a really good one for 3D printing, because they tend to be fairly flat or basic shapes, so they're easy to print. So it's a good one. Was that Woodner Area School?
Yes.
Yeah, we did work with Woodner on one of those projects a few years ago, and there's I don't know if she's still there, but a teacher called Miff. Yeah, she'd done a fantastic project looking at Australia's big things, so the big pineapple and the big so-and-so in Hass, and then the students created their own big thing that they would like to see in their town. Oh, she's still there. That's great. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else? Well, what I'll do, Abigail, is put the more details about that UniSA spatial reasoning research and the links to those different opportunities I shared at the end. I'm always happy for people to reach out, if they've got specific questions or would like some support with getting started with any of this. I'm always happy to have a chat or jump on a Zoom call or Teams call.
Thanks, Mandy. That's fabulous. Thank you those that attended live, and hopefully the other people that registered will be able to watch this recording back after. Thank you again, Mandy, and hopefully we can look at running some other sessions next year.
Yes, I hope so. We'll talk soon.